Hi guys. I just learned that I have uh, been exposed to COVID-19. Very, very not great. So we're just gonna be doing the presentation from here at my very comfortable house. Below me is Blake Matos. He is my partner in crime. Today we're gonna be teaching you about the study of life through non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So what is life? In biology, life is defined by the following seven key characteristics: the ability to respond to stimuli, growth, reproduction, metabolism, maintaining homeostasis, cellular organization, and adaptation. In this presentation, we're going to be looking at a different perspective. This main focus won't be on these seven characteristics, but instead what allows them to be possible, which is maintaining a stable order, the ability of self-replication, harvesting energy, and being able to predict and anticipate the future environment. So, how life is possible has intrigued scientists since the beginning of time. But in 1944, there was conceptual breakthrough in the study of life. Through various studies and experiments and hours of intellectual pondering, American physicist Erwin Schrödinger came to the conclusion that thermodynamics is a key to understanding what makes life possible. However, this was not the thermodynamics many were used to, which is equilibrium thermodynamics. It is a different branch of chemistry known as non-equilibrium thermodynamics that allows us to study life to the fullest extent and understand how organisms can maintain a stable order, self-replicate, harvest energy, and predict future environments. So, maintaining a stable order in thermal equilibrium. Given a system of particles with temperature T in thermal equilibrium, the probability of a particle being in a certain state is dictated by its energy, and the particles in the system should be Boltzmann distributed. There are two types of fields of study, known as microstates and macrostates. The microstate of a system is defined by the arrangement in each molecule in the system at a specific instant of time. The macrostate of a system is defined by its macroscopic properties, such as volume, density, temperature, and pressure. There is a formula which helps us move from microstates to macrostates, which is shown on the next slide. Okay. So the probabilities of states are valued because with them, one can find the collective thermodynamic properties of a system, such as intensive entropy, entropy per unit mass of substance, and specific energy, entropy per unit mass of, wait, I said that wrong, energy per unit mass of a substance. E is the energies of a particles in a system, where P is the probabilities of a system being in a certain state. Subscript I is referring to whether the system is in microstate I. You can see this on the formula sheet to the side of us. With entropy and energy of a system, one can then find enthalpy, Gibbs free energy, and pressure, which describe macrostates of a system. So finally, we get to the topic that we were learning today, which is non-equilibrium thermodynamics, but a tongue twister. However, the Boltzmann distribution can't be used to calculate probabilities within living beings. This is because living beings go through such an extreme amount of chemical processes that they are never in thermodynamic equilibrium. In an organism, there are applied fields, changing forces on every internal system over time, and waves of chemical influxes causing constant changes in energy throughout the being. Yet, throughout completing all life processes, living organisms maintain a stable, low energy structural organization. How is this apparent defiance of the second law of thermodynamics possible? Well, we're about to find out. So, time reversal symmetry, my favorite. According to the theory of time reversal symmetry, any order of events that is able to occur in a system should have an equal probability of happening in the reverse direction. Momentum, position, and time should be reversible for any situation. A simple explanation would be that if I were to fill my phone up with initial momentum m, and in 2 seconds it peaks with a distance traveled of 10 meters, it will be equally as probable for me to drop the phone from 10 meters high, and it will fall for 2 seconds and hit the ground with momentum m. Yet this is rarely seen in life forms. We can observe a zygote grow from an embryo, then a fetus, and so on. But the reverse chain of events never occurs. Why is this? In equilibrium thermodynamics, the probability of being in a certain state is the main focus to the use it will to use it to calculate the entropy and energy of a system. However, it was proposed by world-renowned chemist Gavin Crooks that in non-equilibrium thermodynamics, we need to focus on the probability of going a system through a trajectory or sequence of different states. Ooh, tongue twister. Rather than simply going through a spontaneous reaction. Now I'm gonna go pass it to my friend Blake down there.
So Gavin Crooks proposed the Crookes fluctuation theorem. And in the Crookes fluctuation theorem, it's demonstrated that the probability of a forward sequence of states, so from one state going from essentially like I to J to K, compared to the reverse sequence of states from J to K to I, is determined by the amount of heat evolved in the processes that occur during the forward trajectory of states. Whichever trajectory of state changes releases the most heat is the one most likely to occur. So instead of like A to B to C, it could be like A to C to B or something like that. And whichever one releases the most heat throughout the changes is the one that will happen most likely in nature. So this is given by the formula like pi of y over pi prime of y prime is equal to exp, and then in the brackets is change in q of y over k of b times t, which is temperature. Where pi of y is referring to the forward direction of state changes, pi asterisk of y asterisk is referring to the reverse direction, and the change in q of y is referring to the heat release during the forward sequence of the state changes. The Crookes fluctuation theorem answers the question posed from time reversal symmetry. So as the more probable series of changes is the one that loses heat energy, it then lacks the energy needed to move in the reverse direction because it's been released, so it can't go back. And when heat is lost, kinetic energy is also lost. So the particles start to move slower in the system, which causes a decrease in entropy, which allows the system to stay stable and maintained. So for self-replication, for an organism to be considered living, it has to have the ability to self-replicate. So this could be from asexual reproduction or making more cells to heal a wound or just growing in general. So this goes against time symmetry because for an organism to grow, they have to be able to make more cells from one cell than make one cell from more cells. They can't be making like, you have to make two cells from one, not one, two cells can't go to one because then it won't grow. So there also needs to be a determined durability of these new cells in order for them to last. So they have to live a certain point and they can't go back. They can't die. So to keep natural processes acting in the reverse direction, they have to be kept far away from the equilibrium point where the rate of the forward reaction equals the rate of the reverse reaction. The energy needed to do this is found in multiple sources, such as food for humans or sunlight energy for plants. And a point that's been made recently about the possible origins of life elaborates on how the more durable and complex a structure is, the more energy it requires to stay away from equilibrium, which makes sense because there's more structures in the organism. There's more chemical processes that it goes through. So more energy is required to keep it in that state. So at the very beginnings of life, low-level organisms, a very possible strategy would have been replicating into very simple structures because this requires them to use less energy when replicating. So they would have more energy for future replications and they would be able to grow their population like faster and overpopulate their competition. So essentially what this image demonstrates is when this is showing a system of molecules going from the state of I to J to K in comparison from K to J to I. So the yellow line represents the energy that travels through it. And it's showing how different energy is required at different states and at different points in time. And once you get to K is more of the structured, the molecules are very they're spread out, they're apart. And when you get to K, they're finally structured and they all come together properly. So it's more likely that'll happen because more heat is released into the environment as those processes occur, where in the reverse direction, heat is put into the system, which is less likely for it to happen. So these are essentially calculations that explain how self-replication is possible. So I'm just going to explain these basic ones, and then there's more complex ones on the next few slides, which we'll brush over, but they're not necessarily super important for this demonstration. So given the microstates I and j in the previous slides, we'll give them energies E of I and E of j respectively. And we're going to use this time reversal symmetry formula to see the relationship between the forward and backward state changes at equilibrium. So pi of I to j is known as the transitional matrix element. And essentially, it represents the probability that the system is at microstate J at that time, given the system began in microstate I at time equals 0. So the heat expelled from the change in states from I to J is represented by this series below. And the change in Q of I to J is how much the entropy changes throughout the state change. And this is derived from this general equation down here. And S bath just means like the system that it's in. It's like referred to as like a heat bath. And this shows the irreversibility of the state change of Y, showing the entropy that's increased in the surroundings during the forward trajectory from I to J to K, rather than K to J to I. So these are more calculations. We can move on from this slide. Next slide. These are further calculations, and essentially they all sum up here. And what the purpose of these calculations essentially is it ties in Crookes fluctuation theorem with the second law of thermodynamics. And what it overall proves is that the greater the macroscopic irreversibility, so the chance that it'll go from this macro state to this macro state, compared to this macro state to this macro state, relates directly to the greater minimum entropy production in the surroundings. So the more entropy change, the greater entropy change in the surroundings from the change in macro state, like the more entropy is released is the probability that macro state change will be permanent. Because then you would need like the reverse to happen, and you would need more heat, but the heat's already been released. So it can't go from here to here. It's already gone from here to here. So in harvesting energy, they performed an interesting experiment at MIT where physicists essentially want to test the hypothesis about systems of molecules and how they arrange themselves in structures that best harvest energy from their environment. So what they did was, as shown in part A, they set up a system of molecules and attached springs to them. Well, it's a system of objects, and they represented molecules. And they placed a random force onto the springs and oscillated them at a random frequency. And C is a 3D representation of what all the molecules or objects look like when combined through the series of springs. A is more of a 2D representation. And after oscillating at 3 different frequencies, for example, they did it with multiple frequencies, but in the picture it shows the outcomes of 3 different frequencies. They then organized themselves into structures that resonated the best with a certain frequency that they were oscillated at. And when them resonating better means that they absorbed energy from their surroundings better. So they were able to harvest energy better, which relates to like how plants like grow by getting energy from the sunlight, how humans grow through eating. So the way that they like stay in that structure is through harvesting energy or absorbing work. That's another way to put it. So this explains why in natural processes, molecules do not always rearrange themselves into ones of higher entropy, but they instead form a structure where they can best absorb / harvest energy. Next slide. Now, predicting / anticipating a future environment. From an evolutionary standpoint, those poorly fitted to their environment die, and the ones well fitted survive and reproduce. So throughout time, those who survive adapt to their environment and realize cyclistic events, such as those who realize that seasons change were able to store food for the winter because they realize every year animals go into hiding and the plants die. Some animals, of course. So systems and molecules actually react in the same manner, which is interesting. So in this experiment, they oscillated the molecules at a series of different frequencies. So they oscillate this frequency, then this frequency, then this frequency. And what they found was that some molecules, when placed under these cyclical conditions, when the way they organize themselves in this like stage here compared to this stage and this stage, because they would go through those 3, is that it wasn't always necessarily the best like one at harvesting energy here. So we learned on the last slide that they organize themselves into the structure that harvests energy the best. But this wasn't always necessarily the best one if they were going through a cycle. But what the molecules realized is if they harvested in this one, it would then be best when they oscillated the next frequency. It would then be like a better chance of getting into a better structure here, and then a better final structure. So molecules like were able to realize, I don't know if realize is the right term, but they were able to like reorder themselves into a structure that would be best for absorbing energy in the future, even if it wasn't the most thermodynamically like favorable position at the current moment. So essentially, like we're looking at groups of non-living molecules showing like living characteristics, like they're able to predict or anticipate a future environment. And that's essentially how life is possible through the study of thermodynamics. We demonstrate a theory of how life might be possible, or how life might have started with self-replication through divisions that didn't require a lot of energy, so into more simple structures. And then essentially how like non-living molecules are able to put themselves into positions that absorb energy the best and harvest the most work. And then time reversal symmetry, where it's like the more energy release, the less likely it is for you to go back into the state that you started at. So that's why you don't see like humans get younger, because you don't see like people go from death to life, only life to death. You don't get smaller as you grow older. Well, I mean, you do, but you know what I'm saying. All right. And that is our presentation. So thank you for listening.